Good evening, everybody. This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Welcome to another fantastic episode of the Perceptive Podcast. Our topic today is going to be talking on a more interesting topic that we normally don't hear about much from the game industry or game development side of things, and that is from PR and the marketing end. This is one of those topics we've talked to some developers about in the past, especially about its importance and its utility for developers trying to reach out and improve the branding of their games and company, but we haven't really dedicated a full cast to it yet. But we're going to be doing that tonight. But first, please welcome back to the cast contributor for Game Wisdom, James Ellerby.
Hi.
Hi, James.
Everybody.
It's great to have you on. And for those of you listening to this recorded, we're actually recording this on James's birthday. We recorded the previous cast the day before, so we're having a very busy birthday week for James.
Yeah.
And please welcome our guest this time. He is a PR specialist, Logan Williams.
Hello, everyone, and happy birthday, James. I didn't know it was your birthday.
Thank you. No, it's fine.
Yeah, no, this is awesome.
Hey, Logan, it's great to have you on. Logan actually reached out to me via email, and we're definitely, it's good to see more people reaching out to Game Wisdom that way. By the time you hear this cast, our discussion with Trayvon should already go up. He and I actually talked on Twitter to set up the podcast. And I think it's always great to be able to reach out to these new guests, and I'm sure we're going to have a fantastic conversation tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, to get the ball rolling then, Logan, since this is your first time on the cast, could you tell everyone listening a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I don't know, it's kind of hard to introduce it, but I'm not necessarily the founder because Indie Wolverine, it's not like an LLC or an official business entity. But that is kind of the brand. I work off of my name. So Logan Williams, but the brand is Indie Wolverine. And basically that's, a website that I run, to help spread knowledge and, resources that I find regarding, marketing, PR, in the indie game space. So anything cool that I find or anything that I learn along the way, I try to share it on that website. And I also promote my services as well. So I also handle marketing and PR for indie games. Basically, I've been doing this for it's almost exactly a year now. I started last year around this time, and so I've been working exclusively with indie games for the past year. Before that, I did in marketing, but it was more based off of all industries. I was living like an agency lifestyle, so I worked at a few different agencies. One was primarily a custom web development agency, and that's where I learned how to build websites. We were working in a custom framework, and so I learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then I moved on to primarily digital marketing agency, and that's where I learned more of the inbound marketing, for various industries. It wasn't specifically to games at that time, but that's where I learned things like SEO and search engine marketing, and that's where I was certified in Google AdWords, Analytics, Google Shopping, HubSpot, and all that good stuff. But eventually, I just got tired of the agency lifestyle and, working with dentists and plumbers and used car dealerships. And, eventually, I was like, I'm not happy, I'm not, because I always look at people that, they do something that they're passionate about. So it's really not about the money, but they still do it, and they'll work overnight, like they'll miss sleeping and all that good stuff. And that's something I really envied, and I wanted to find that passion. So one day I kind of just sat down and, I thought, well, what makes me happy? And the first thing that came to mind was, well, I like video games a lot. So I was trying to figure out, well, how can I, incorporate this into my life and I guess streaming could be one of the things that would come up. But I want to have a major impact. And I guess you can still have that impact while being a streamer. But I ended up sending an email out to Bitmonster Games. They're located about 2 hours away from me, and I knew about them for a while because they developed a game on the iPhone called Lily, and it was an excellent game on the iPhone. It was featured in the App Store. It got a lot of coverage. It was a beautiful game, and I remember downloading it pretty much near day one and playing it and really enjoying it. And then when I found out that Bitmonster was only 2 hours away from me, I thought, man, if I could just get a job with those guys, that would be amazing. And then, I was sitting down and I thought, well, I really love marketing. I hate doing it for a ton of different industries. And I wanted to, I still love it though. But then I was like, well, you know what? I'll send an email to Bitmonster, and if I can get them as a partner, if I can help them with marketing and PR, then that would be the dream, Yeah. So I sent an email, and it worked out, and we've been working together ever since, and that's kind of how things started.
Awesome. And I know regarding like indie PR, that's definitely a very niche profession, but it's one that's becoming, I think, more and more important for a lot of developers.
Go ahead. Oh no, I was going to say it. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's especially becoming more vital as time goes by. The barrier to entry into game development is at an all-time low, and it's only going to continue to lower. The only thing that's really stopping people now is just resources, which there are still a ton of resources, but over time there are going to be even more. So over the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, honestly, 2 to 5 years, I really see the indie scene in particular blowing up.
Yeah.
Something similar to, like your App Store or your Play Store. Hopefully it doesn't get that bad.
Yeah.
But I do see the market really blowing up with all these games. And another thing I noticed is, your AAA studios or your big publishers, they're really going after your heavy multiplayer games, MOBAs,
first person shooters. Yeah.
Yep. So I really see those old school single player heavy story games, the games that I grew up loving. Like I grew up playing a ton of JRPGs and really enjoying playing through a game and finding every hidden chest and every little tiny nook and cranny of a game and really learning about the game or the story. And I think that over time, and it's already kind of there, but I think over time it's going to be even more of a thing that the indies will take that space. The indies will take over your single player, your story, your heavy story driven games. I think over time that'll primarily become an indie thing, and luckily that's what I love in video games. So yeah, I really I think you hit the nail on the head there that it's becoming a really, really saturated market. So, with that being said, there's going to be you have to have some sort of marketing knowledge, some sort of grasp on how to get publicity for your game, how to generate some noise and get people to know that you exist.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of really good topics you just brought up there, Logan. We're going to have to try and process each one. I would say the first thing, definitely agree with you about the rise of the indie market. I mean, the last 5 years, or I should say 5-6 years now, has been a huge time for indie developers. We saw that bubble really just grow, or I should say probably now like the gold rush period of the indie developers, thanks to games like Braid, Super Meat Boy, and then we started to see, as you're saying, Logan, more of the experimental, more of the single-player driven stuff. Games like Gone Home, Dear Esther. And one of the things that we've talked about numerous times on these casts is the fact that the indie space really is the best place for these types of games. You're never going to see a game like Duskers or Her Story be developed by like a 50-man studio, co-published or co-founded by EA or Microsoft. There's just too much risk there for that studio to make something such a niche topic. But with the independent scene, that's becoming a lot more viable. And as you just said, the barrier of entry is low and it continues to get lower these days. A really good example of that would be like Greenlight from Steam. When I first talked to independent developers and seeing that about 7-8 years ago, there was no such thing like that. If you wanted to get on Steam, there's of course all the stories of you had to know a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy who knew someone at Valve to get you on the platform, unless you had a top-selling game. And while the greenlight process isn't, 100% perfect, we've of course heard a lot of stories of issues on that front. It's still giving independent developers more freedom to get their game out there. And I would say another big thing obviously would be crowdfunding. Kickstarter, Patreon, Indiegogo, and even that new one, Fig, I think, is also giving indies more power and again the ability to get around the traditional barriers of game development, namely needing millions of dollars, a publisher's backing, a retail store. These are things you don't really need these days in order to make your game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things that with the indie game scene right now is that you can get on Greenlight and you can make it to Steam, and a great example actually of that that I want to bring up is the Goblins and Grottos game that I'm working on. The team behind that, I mean, those guys, they're not, they have their jobs, they have their full-time jobs. They're spread out across the world. They don't all live in the same area. And I'm actually the only one located in the United States that's on the team. So it's really diverse, but they can still make it on Steam. It's actually on Steam right now as an early access title, but they can make it on Steam, and still make an excellent game. And they don't, because the barrier to entry is really low and there's so many different ways to make a game now. And they've taken advantage of that. But like I said, they didn't need funding. They didn't need an investor. They didn't need to go through Kickstarter. They just did it on the side because they're passionate about it. And it's something that's viable. It's something that you can do now. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree.
Yep. And I mean, these podcasts are proof of this ability for networking and cross communications. I mean, hell, over the last 2-3 years, I've spoken to people in Australia, Africa, Canada. I even have a contact in Brazil that I've spoken to a few times. And this kind of stuff would have literally not been possible 10 years ago. Even during the rise of the internet age in the early thousands, the level of transparency and the level of freedom offered to developers just wasn't there yet.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that does come with all of that, so when the barrier to entry is really low, your opportunity to make what you want to make is becoming even more possible. You start to get the market gets saturated with games, but 2, you start to get the rumors of, the bubble bursting or like an indie apocalypse. But this is something that I've read many articles on it, and it's something that, I really don't look at it as a negative. I look at it as basically you can't, if you want to sell a commercial game and potentially become successful or have a commercial success, you just have to be a pro. You can't be. So the golden age, I guess, 5 years ago or so, where you could go through Kickstarter and put up there, a very nice trailer, but really you're very inexperienced and you could possibly get, whatever you want for the game, possibly really exceed your goals by a lot back then. But while that's not necessarily happening now all the time, it's not a bad thing. It just means you have to get good. You have to get good at making a polished game. But on top of that, you'll have developers that leave these very large AAA studios who, they're very talented, but on a daily basis, they're coloring rocks and adding in grass and foliage, because that's just, they're at such a large studio that's kind of their one specific, and then they get tired of that. So they want to leave. And then this whole indie thing is available to them. And because they have the talent, they can make an excellent game. They can get on Steam. There's so many different things. The Humble right now, you can get on the Humble store. They have a Humble monthly subscription service. There's so many different opportunities to get your game out there and, potentially turn it into a financial success. But yeah, I mean, indiepocalypse thing, I just wanted to bring that up because I read a lot on it, and I think the only people that should be worried about indiepocalypse are developers that are very new. They're not polished, but that's where there's other sites where you can put your game up there for free. Like you can make a quick game, do some game jams and, upload your game and then have people play it for free. But, don't take it and try to make it into a commercial product and make money off of it if it's not a polished game,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's where I think the industry's at right now.
Yeah, exactly. If I could fist bump you right now through Skype, I would, because that is a point that I've been harping on so much over the last year or so with indie games and the development space. And you are completely right, in my opinion, Logan, about the days where you could just make like another Asteroids clone or make, Pac-Man but with cats or something like that and sell it for, $5-10. That is gone. As you said, the barrier of entry has been lowered and the bar, I think, has really been raised. Look at what's happened over the last few months with independent games. We saw games like Duskers. I'm looking at games like Moon Hunters from Kit Fox Games. The variety and diversity from the independent market is just amazing. And as you said a few minutes ago, we're really seeing them develop these amazing single-player, even just like narrative-driven games that you won't see anywhere else. And I do have to go back to that point in a few minutes because there's something else I want to bring up. But with the independent scene, like when we look at independent games like 8-9 years ago, before this whole thing happened, it was very much considered the quote-unquote like the shovelware. We saw very basic games, Congregate, Shockwave, very simple games because there wasn't really that platform for it. But now today, the options are there, the technology is there that you can make these games that are amazing. I mean, a few minutes ago, you talked about the passion that drives game developers and drives people in this industry. Stardew Valley, again, was created by one guy over 2 years, because he wanted to make that game. Yeah. Like, no one else was making that game. He did it all himself, and it worked out spectacularly for him. But, again, for developers, as you're saying, the ones who are entering this market thinking, oh, I'm just going to put together a little thing, I'll spend 2 months, release it for $10, and I'll make, $500,000. It's not going to happen anymore. You need to take the time. You have to do this research. And this is an actually really interesting point. And I think James can back me up on this one. For a lot of the new developers who are joining the scene, they seem to get these ideas a lot more than sort of the old guard who are transitioning from AAA to indie. Yesterday, in terms of when we're actually recording these casts, we spoke to a developer, Trayvon, he's only 23 years old. He just got out of college, and he's already got this whole plan and group together for not just making his game, but the PR side. He's got a Kickstarter starting to formulate, and he's doing all this planning that I don't even hear from like the AAA guys who joined this industry. Like, he seems to have everything like planned out. Wouldn't you say so, James?
Oh yeah, definitely. Actually, one of the amazing things is that he got together people that he met in college. Like, he went to college for games, and while he was there, he was like, I think he was saying even in high school he was like leading stuff for like, these kids they're starting young and they're coming in full like a bull, just ready to take on any challenge in the gaming industry. And I think it's really going to be setting a standard for a lot of these people who have had that AAA backing and are just like, I think I'll get more popular on my own with indie. I mean, right now you're seeing, especially with the game Mighty Number 9, like when the pedigree that it came off of got so much support because of the pedigree, and now it's actually coming under a lot of fire for that a lot of people are saying that the product that they're showing isn't what they help support. Yeah. It's not what they want. It's not. And this is coming from a pedigree, like
the guy who originally made Mega Man, Kenji Inafune.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I bet as someone who does PR, I know, Logan, you're probably chomping at the bit to dig into My Number 9. but I want to talk more about PR and those gaffes later in the cast. So I know we could spend 40 minutes right now on my number 9.
Yeah.
And yeah, as James said, like Trayvon, like he's just out of college and he's already got this plan together. And like I've spoken to a lot of developers, like either people who are older or those again transitioning from AAA or AA to indie, and some of them really do have that trouble with the PR side. And I think one of the things that we're starting to see is that name and pedigree aren't standing for as much these days compared to, again, like 3-4 years ago when Double Fine basically said, I want to make an adventure game. They got like $2 million from that. Like, now it's becoming a lot harder to do. And I think for you and for you do, I think your role and for anyone else who does good PR and helps promoting these games, I think that's going to become more and more important over the next like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that if you do come from, a large studio, if you did work on some commercially successful or widely known games, there still is value in terms of reaching out to press, and especially early on. So if your game if you don't even have a demo yet available, if you're still trying to make some news beats and reach out to press and get them to cover you, or your new studio or your game, letting them know, hey, by the way, I worked on The Witcher 3, or, I did this or that. It adds more value to you. It makes you more reputable. For the person that you were just speaking about, that they're coming straight out of college, that's not an option for them, but what they can do. So for that person, it's going to be more vital that they have something to show. So whether it's really good looking screenshots or gameplay videos, so they're not going to be able to dive into, well, I worked at, Epic Games, or, you know what I mean? So they're going to have to handle it a little bit different. Doesn't mean that they can't make it work, because they absolutely can. Students that come out of college and make games, or make games during college, there's no better time to try and go for it than right now, because of all the resources that are available to you. You have, Unity and the Unreal Engine that are both excellent. There are a ton of resources for both engines, to my understanding. So you can go out there and learn how to make what you want to make. And if you're passionate enough, then you can put enough time towards it. But that's another thing I want to stress, is that a lot of people, when they're trying to learn, whether it's marketing, PR, or game development, game design, anything in life really, if you want to become a professional, you can't beat time. Time's the one thing that you can't escape. So even when you look at like Twitch streamers that are really big, like a King Gothalion, those streamers, they're putting in 8-9 hours a day into a stream. So think about in your career, if you were to put 8-9 hours a day focusing on your game or whatever aspect of your career, 100% focus, because they're not taking a lunch break. And for the most part, they're not taking a lunch break. They're not, talking with their coworkers and, and losing focus on what they're doing. They're doing that. They're entertaining people on a stream for 9 hours every single day, sometimes including weekends. So that time, you can't escape it, even for someone that's streaming a video game. So if you're coming out of college and you want to put a game together, if they've put in time over the weekends at, during nights, then there's, they can possibly be amazing, especially artists. So I totally get both sides of the field, but going back to my original point is that, game developers, artists, anyone that's coming from the AAA, studios or anything like that, there still is a ton of value with that, especially if you're trying to earn some coverage via press, because you can say, well, I worked on these games. And especially if you're trying to do crowdfunding for your game, if you can say, we've worked on these games, that makes your Kickstarter more reputable, and it makes it a little bit easier for someone to throw money at you, versus, like an 18-year-old kid who is like, hey, I've got this great idea. Here's a screenshot. Yeah. Please support me. So
definitely. And I want to go back to the other point you mentioned a few minutes ago before we get too far away from it, regarding the rise of the single player and how AAA developers are starting to move away from that. I think one of the more interesting sides that we do see, at least rarely, the AAA blockbuster games, like obviously like Uncharted 4, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and of course whenever the new Final Fantasy games come out, every 27 years it seems like we get like a brand new one. But I think you are right that the single player market is becoming harder, I think, to make it work in terms of giving something that makes people excited. When you look at a lot of AAA games, 9 times out of 10 they're going to have some kind of multiplayer mode. Call of Duty being the best example of that. Like, it seems like the only games that can really get away with single player only are very highly crafted games. Stuff like the Mario, pretty much like any Nintendo game. When they
the Elder Scrolls series.
Yeah. But, I mean, there's always going to be a need for a really great story. The market's always going to be there. But games like, another one I would say is Dark Souls. They do great on that, but that game works really good for streaming. Yeah. It works really good for YouTube because you're supposed to die. You come back, you play it again. There's replayability there.
Definitely.
So you die, you come back, you beat the game. All right, we'll do New Game Plus. So there's replayability. It's fun to watch. So if your game is really just heavy story rich, and there's really no reason to come back and play it again, for a AAA studio, why make that? Why invest all the time? Why, get the overhead and put a team of, 100 plus people on a game, to make a single player game that someone could possibly watch a Twitch stream and sit through, an 8-hour stream, which is the extreme as a viewer, but you could sit through an 8-hour stream and possibly see the entire game from start to finish. After you watch a game that is story driven and you see the start to the finish,
you don't need to play it.
There's not a lot of incentive to go buy the game and play it. Unless you've really bought into the lore, or if you've followed the game for a long time, if you've really been sold, then there's not much of a reason to go in there. And even with Uncharted, there's a multiplayer aspect. So like your old school, games that were just really about taking you on a journey and entertaining you, those games, I think, are going to shift. I mean, they are shifting, but I think they're going to eventually primarily become, an indie game thing because they have the opportunity to do it. As an indie game developer, you have so many opportunities and you're only limited by your own creativity. So you can make anything you want. So you can if you want to make your amazing story, go do it. There's a market for it. But yeah, it just doesn't make sense if I'm looking at it as a AAA studio, I would never make a story driven, campaign with like no multiplayer available. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't work. That'd be a waste.
Or like no like streaming functionality, nothing for like communal aspect of it. I think would be a good point. And I think you're right about Twitch streaming, YouTube. I mean, these are elements, again, like 5-10 years ago, no one thought these things were actually going to work. And I mean, hell, look at Game Wisdom. I mean, over the last year, we now have a whole Twitch stream. I have a YouTube channel that has finally hit 500 subscribers, hopefully by the time this goes up. And these are things that, again, like, we never thought this was going to be possible. Again, I guess James and I we can be the old guys again and talk about this, that, this stuff wasn't available when we were children. I mean, there wasn't even internet when I was growing up in the 90s, at least not in the early 90s, at least. But the point is that, I think as you're saying, Logan, that these elements are becoming more and more important, and at the same time, some of the stuff just doesn't mesh well with a AAA when you have, budgets in the millions of dollars, like 30-plus man studio. You can't take a risk on something that say, let's make a 5-hour story-driven game that can only be played one time. Let's do that over the next 2 years and see how well it goes. Would you rather make that, or would you rather make a 10-hour first-person shooter with an extensive multiplayer campaign that can be expanded on for like a year or two after release? And it's going to be interesting again to see just where things go along those lines. Because
we also have the hero shooter genre really popping up, and like you can tell, a lot of the big market studios are really trying to cash in on the hero shooter genre.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. the games, they have, your microtransactions now, even after a $60 price. Yeah. You buy the game and then you can buy, costumes and whatever. And that works. And it works crazy well if people buy into the brand. If people become, big fans of your game, they'll be fine with spending $5 and getting a few costumes, or being able to spend $5 and, get a few extra loot crates early and go through that process. So, going back to the AAA studio thing, why not? There's no reason to not make a game like that. That's heavy on that. There's all the reasons to not make a single player game, because that's how people lose jobs. And that's a sad thing. But if it's just not a possibility at this point for AAA studio to do that.
Yep, and I think you just touched on a really strong point there, Logan, regarding building games as branding. The quote-unquote games as a service is getting a lot of pull these days from the AAA market because, again, as you just said, there is risk with a single-player game. You spend 5 years making a 10-hour game. What's the chance you're going to recoup that unless you're making a Final Fantasy or an Elder Scrolls game, something like that? But for a new studio or a smaller studio, that is incredibly risky, especially because there's no like meat in there for more people. But the games as a service, and especially games as a brand, is definitely becoming more and more viable. I mean, we can talk about the current big example that would probably be Blizzard's Overwatch. They're, building that out as this huge thing. There's, comics. There's little vignettes on their site. They're trying to do the whole Team Fortress, which, I mean, Valve was brilliant with doing that as one of like the first developers. You have this whole brand, so it just expands on everything. And as you just said, when you build a game like that and it pulls those people in, they're going to love to spend, $3 for a little bit of DLC, or, $2 for a exclusive item, or $5 for a new game mode, or stuff like that. And it works because these people are engaged. They know this brand's going to keep going. And I know people who have spent, probably over 300-400 hours playing Team Fortress over their lifetime. And, they probably have no intention on stopping until, Valve at some crazy point, maybe in 50 years, says maybe we'll move on to a Team Fortress 3. Like, they don't even need to work on a sequel anymore because that brand is just so powerful for them. And we see similar things again with Blizzard. I've spoken about this a few years ago, but Blizzard is another master of branding their games. Each game is onto itself its own genre. So they don't have to worry about competing with each other or losing fans. They just make a game in a completely new genre. And then they can do, cross-game promotions and tie-ins and stuff like that. I mean, a good example, like when I buy like the Diablo 3 Collector's Edition, I got keys for World of Warcraft. I got a exclusive Hearthstone something.
Yep.
And for someone new, that basically gives them the incentive to try those games. If it doesn't work, they'll go back to Diablo 3. But if it does work, hey, guess what? You now have someone buying and playing 2 of your games or 3 of your games, etc., etc. And another great example, I think we'll also talk more about this later on the cast regarding like PR, like do's and don'ts, would be Overkill Software and the Payday brand, which I'm a fan of Payday, so I've been following them over the last, I think it's been like going on 3 years since Payday 2 came out, or maybe 2 years. And they've also done an amazing job. They have video series. They have like live actors who represent these characters. They do, contests, promos, the DLC, the works. And I think that also brings up a very interesting point that I'm not sure we want to say for later, but what happens when the brand gets betrayed? Like if the developer makes a mistake. This goes also back to the My Number 9 issue. Like the good thing about these brands is that it makes the game as a whole greater, but then you really do have to walk on eggshells, because if you screw up and you hurt that brand, I mean, it's basically like can't believe I forget the name, like the Zeppelin crashing, the humanity, disaster with that brand can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really familiar with the Mighty Nine. I haven't followed it, a lot.
Yeah.
But I have heard many things about that game, and from what I've heard, and it could be completely wrong, is that was kind of a slow sinking ship. That didn't really happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
I think that falls more on communication
Yeah.
and really messing up communication.
Definitely.
So that game was delayed many times. Just over time,
It's the
you can turn like your biggest. I've seen, working with a few games, I've seen some heavy fans that were incredibly passionate about the game turn into like the worst people, like the worst trolls ever. Because when someone loves a brand so much, or when you love anything so much, you become very passionate about it.
Yeah.
And then if the communication breaks down, or if you don't like where things are going, you might be a little bit quicker. Some people might be a little bit quicker to flip that switch and become angry and aggressive and leave nasty comments and reviews and all sorts of things. But that all really stems from true passion of the game. So it really boils down to communication. I believe Mighty Number 9. And once again, I'm not incredibly familiar, so I could be 100% wrong. But if they were to better, work with their communication, that they could have avoided many, many things. Obviously, the recent trailer was pretty terrible, but who knows with that trailer? Who knows if that was their idea all along, is to create a trailer that generated some buzz. It didn't generate hype, but it generated buzz. More people know about Mighty 9 because of that trailer. And that could have been the tactic there. I mean, the game has been in development for so long. It's been delayed so many times. So it's hard to keep people's attention over a really long span of time, unless you're doing a really good job of communication.
Definitely.
And it seemed like they were failing a bit with that communication beforehand. So, one of the ways it could have caught back up is with that crazy trailer.
Yeah, and really good point about communication. I think if there's one thing that I see a lot of indie developers and new people mess up on, is communication. There's the classic statement that a developer just spends like 2-3 years like sequestered in their house working on a game, not talking to the outside world, and then a game just magically appears one day. That doesn't work anymore. You need to be talking to your community. You need to be engaging them. If you go more than like 3-4 weeks without an update, people are going to start to wonder, is the game dead? What happened? And you never, ever want people to think that, because as you just said, Logan, your fans, like the very enthusiastic, the ones who are very loyal to you, they can turn on you. And that can lead to just so much trouble. I remember the name of the Zeppelin, the Hindenburg. It occurred to me a minute later. Just wanted to mention that for any history buffs. But another good example would be Starbound, which also had like a kind of blowing up of their fan base for a short period of time. I think it was when... I can't remember the specifics, so I didn't follow the game too much. I think it was when there were like delays and there wasn't any communication going on. But as you're saying, especially for you who does PR for a living and specializes in that, you can see these trouble signs. It's the classic adage, death by 1,000 cuts. When things start to go wrong, it just keeps going wrong, and it can sink projects and just kill fan bases that way.
Yeah, I mean, communication's key. You'll see a lot of the more successful indie studios now. If you go to their Twitter or if you go to their Facebook, whatever platforms they're active on, you'll see that they're incredibly open. They communicate with their audience. They look to engage the community, whether it's early in development or after the game's already launched. They're very open. They're active. So that's become that's become expected of many players. Is that especially if you're in early access, you cannot go a certain amount of time without saying something, because people are very quick to give up, and they're very quick to say, their favorite thing to say. Is this game dead? This game is dead. Hey, this game's dead. I heard this game's dead. And it's on the other side, on my side, when I read all that, it's the most annoying stuff ever, especially when a game's in early access. Because I know how hard the developers are working. I know,
yes,
my job is to communicate with them and basically stay on top and understand exactly what they're doing when they're doing it, so I can start to work on plans for the future for them. And when I see how hard the developers are working and the hours that they're putting into it, and then I read these comments with game's dead, this is dead, all that kind of stuff. It gets so frustrating because they have no idea. They don't understand. And it's tough. But there's other times when, not only you don't hear anything, but sometimes it's because the developer really can't say anything yet because they're working on a major update and they want to utilize all of the information about the update and package it, into a substantial PR push, So it's something that there are some times where you can't really say anything and you have to time it, but then it gets hard because the community freaks out because they haven't heard much. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and a lot of great points there, Logan, regarding especially with the fans and the work that goes into the game development. Like with Game Wisdom, I get to also sort of talk to these developers and hear about what's going on, stuff like that. That level of transparency is so key. But for most fans, they don't get to hear these kinds of conversations like the ones that we have or when I talk to a developer. So they're just left with whatever news is on their site, and when you don't update things for 2-3 months, what can they really get from that? They just think that nothing is going on, because if you don't have anything to show, they want something tangible. They don't want to hear that, oh, we've been fixing code or working on the engine. Mm-hmm. They want to see a new screenshot or a teaser footage or alpha gameplay or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do something because, there is also a herd mentality. So when one person speaks up and then a second one decides to speak up, then you'll get, 2-3 more of them. Then it eventually turns into a really large snowball, and there's a huge snowball effect when, your community can turn on you so fast if they don't hear from you. But, like I said before, there's just some times where, you're working on some top secret, really cool stuff. Mm-hmm. You can't really say anything. So you have to come up with other forms of content to give to the community. But on top of that, if you work that way, like if you wanted to introduce a community update blog post kind of thing and start working on those, eventually the community will cut through that and they'll be like, look, we haven't seen an update, what's going on? Mm-hmm. So it gets tough. But the video game community in particular, I don't know what it is, but they can become straight savages. Yes. Like some of the worst stuff that you'll find on the internet. And I believe it stems to just passion. Mm-hmm. I think the community is, some of the most passionate people you'll ever meet, or not necessarily meet, but you'll mm-hmm. See, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I hate throwing the term around gamers because I don't like to throw people into that kind of mm-hmm. Segment, but players, like I said, they can turn into straight savages, and it becomes down to them really loving your game or having a strong interest in your game. So there's give and take for sure, but it all boils down to your communication and how you handle it. Because sometimes you can beat that. I mean, I've seen many times where like negative reviews on Steam, where I've reached out to them and showed empathy and show that look, I'm not a terrible human being. We're not a terrible studio. Mm-hmm. Like we're working, but, and usually that's met with a positive response. So if you're just the best advice I can give any developer on any platform that's working on a game, whether it's currently in development or, it's released and you're working on, expansion or something, and your community starts to become outraged, I would just suggest that you be as honest as you possibly can, and show transparency with the community, because that's what they're really looking for, is just some honest answers, and that's the only way you can really approach it. You can't really say, well, we're cool things are to come. stick around.
Yeah.
You can't tease them. You just got to be honest. And that's what I've found to be the most successful approach to, like community management and keeping people upbeat and keeping them from flooding your game with negative reviews or whatever. And I'm speaking of the Steam platform right now, because the games that I've worked with, they're all PC games on Steam. So that's where what I'm kind of referencing. So
yeah, and going back to what you said a few minutes ago, Logan, regarding the fan base. I mean, we're definitely seeing some sad examples of that over the last few years. Certain topics that I don't want to, name it here, but I think we all know what we're talking about. What's going on with when gamers get a little too fanatic. But
yeah.
But it's always been that push and pull between, do you tell people you promise them the moon and the stars, or do you give them the dirty truth? And it seems that more and more that the truth seems to be better, especially with Kickstarter. I think Kickstarter is really showing the negatives to promising too much. We've seen a lot of Kickstarter projects just get blasted. Like when you promise someone X, Y, and Z and those aren't in there, they're going to say, hey, I gave you my money for that. What the hell? Yeah. And there's a whole, 2-hour discussion waiting just talking about Kickstarter, because it really is that involved of what goes into making a good Kickstarter project. And like a good example of a game that I've been seeing that has just been as not just circling the drain, but in a downward spiral would be Goddess from 22 Cans, a game by Peter Molyneux. And that game has just been every bad thing you can think of what not to do with PR and engaging your fans, they've done it. Like, the game has gone through so many revisions. They've been trying to spin it in as many positive ways as they can, and no one is buying it. And I think right there, that's another really good point about the level of transparency these days. You can't get away with that stuff anymore. Thanks to the internet, thanks to community engagement. If you're doing something illegal or you're lying or whatever, people are going to find out. You really do leave trails on the internet these days. And I mean, I saw like with Payday 2 when they had the whole microtransaction snafu, people actually found like interviews of the developers like 2-3 years ago saying that they weren't going to be any microtransactions. So I mean, you really do need to dot your I's and cross your T's, because if you do something wrong, they will find out. And when that happens, it basically goes nuclear for you.
Yeah, but I mean that also, falls back to communication. Yes. You can always change your thoughts on something. Like a good example would be, Steve Jobs, when, way back in the day, someone asked him, like an interview, they were asking him about tablet computers and what he thought of them, and he said they were overpriced crap for for privileged kids. And then eventually he introduced the iPad, and views change. Things change over time. So if you're a developer and you say one thing and then a few years later you say something that completely contradicts the one thing that you said, if you're just honest and I mean, if you truly are changing your views on something, then be honest about it and be upfront. People respect that. But if you are changing it just to be kind of slimy, and to take advantage of something, that's a whole nother deal. But, if you're honest, everyone's opinions change and they fluctuate every day.
Definitely. And again, just once again, it goes back to communication. As long as you tell people why this is happening. Like, you never want to just say, just because, or, we did this and we're not going to tell you why. You need to have that level of communication. Again, it circles back to good PR skills. And I think a lot of developers either lack it or they just don't want to learn it. And we've seen developers who have done that in the past, who don't communicate, who disappear, or, we've seen cases of massive flameouts. Like, raise your hand if you're listening if you like what happened with like Phil Fish and the whole, Twitter explosion of that game, was it Paranormal Activity, when the developer just like say he's going to send Gabe Newell death threats on Twitter. And I'm like for people like you, me, and James. I mean, we know you don't do that stuff. That's just insanely stupid, especially when you're trying to build a brand.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems that a lot of people don't understand that when you put something on the internet these days, it is, up there for everyone to see.
It's news. It is. If you put it on the internet, it is officially news, and everybody has something to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. But to play devil's advocate, there are. So if you guys have watched, MMA or anything like that, or boxing, you'll see, sometimes good PR or good publicity. You've got to be, a bit crazy. So like your Floyd Mayweather guy is crazy, but that's why he's incredibly rich, disgustingly rich. Same thing with Conor McGregor in the UFC. Mm-hmm. The guy, he knows how to, when he has a mic in front of him, he understands, well, this mic means I have an audience, that I have people listening to me. Yeah. If I say something that is out of the norm, then that's going to generate buzz among the audience that's listening to me. And then that buzz is going to spread. My audience is going to grow. And when my audience grows, that means I'm a bigger influencer, which means I have more power, and then I have more money. So in indie games.
Sorry, I had to sneeze there.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So
there's almost no such thing as bad press sometimes.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, if you're gonna be crazy, you've got to own it. That's your life, and the thing with. Yeah, like Phil Fish, the dude, he says a lot of emotionally driven things, but that is who Phil Fish is. Mm-hmm. And he owns up to it. He's totally fine with it. And that's why Fez did so well. Mm-hmm. That's why he was included in that documentary, and they followed him. And, even though he had a partner that was working on the game who got most of the screen time, it was Phil Fish. The guy is passionate. Mm-hmm. He's showing emotion. It's true emotion. It's a bit off. It sounds a bit crazy. But if Phil Fish was, if he held back way more and he didn't say all the things that he said, and, he didn't he wasn't really transparent about how he really felt, his game wouldn't be as successful. It might, it's still an excellent game. Fez is awesome. But, even with that being said, it wouldn't be nearly as successful as it has been. Unless he was a bit crazy.
Yeah, you either love him or you hate him, basically.
Yeah, but the thing is, even when you hate people, you're gonna listen. You're gonna tune in. Kanye West, same thing. The dude is nuts. But you know what? The guy it's beautiful for PR. If you're in the media industry, you're gonna cover Kanye West because the dude says crazy stuff every single day. On top of that, he strategically had a kid with Kim Kardashian. And Kim Kardashian is another PR beautiful thing. Her whole family.
Oh, yes.
Who cares about what they're doing with their lives? They're media, powerhouses, and their names are going to be out there, whether you think they suck or they don't. Whatever boat you're in, it doesn't matter because you hear them. You know what I mean? And oh yeah, go ahead.
I was about to say, the fact that they have a Kim Kardashian's Hollywood mobile game. Yeah, I heard they're now going to do like a sequel, like another celebrity. The fact that she was the first one to do that, I think that's the proof is in the pudding right there.
Yeah, and she did. It did amazing. If you think about it, so like Kim Kardashian, and actually, I'll go back to. I'm going to make another media reference, I guess, with hip hop. What's his name? Meek Mill, that guy. So if you think about it, he started dating, and I'm going to go on a tiny tangent and I'll get off it quickly, but he started dating Nicki Minaj, but around the same exact time, oh, by the way, he's releasing his app that's similar to Kim Kardashian in the App Store. Oh, by the way, he's releasing a new album. Do you think he's dating Nicki Minaj because they both really enjoy each other's company and they both love each other? That is not it at all. That's straight press. 100%. She's going on, she's starting her tours, her worldwide tours around the same exact time. So take two media powerhouses. I guess Meek Mill wasn't a powerhouse, but you take those two, put them together, you've completely expanded their media reach. So now Meek Mill can do his app. Nicki Minaj can go on her world tour. Meek Mill can have a beef with Drake, and now he's extending his potential soundtrack or his album sales. It's all about taking advantage of opportunities, and I see it all the time in the media with all of these different, hip hop artists. Everything in the media, for the most part, a lot of it's just straight fabricated. But it works because you hear about it. And the thing with Kanye West, he's, there was an example I had with him a while back I was thinking about. But he always acts crazy, but, recently he had a new album come out, and, you started to hear about him shortly before the album came out for saying crazy things that weren't directly related to the album. But what happens is you hear the name. So then the next time you're listening to the radio or you're on the internet and you see, oh, Kanye West's new album, you're going to be more likely or more interested in possibly tuning in and listening to a song. Because you heard, oh, this dude's nuts. He's crazy. Let me hear how his music sounds. And that's how it starts. I guess that's a complete tangent and not directly the same about indie games. But basically the main point is if you are an emotionally driven person and you're a bit crazy, own it. Go for it, because you can possibly become like the next Phil Fish. It might happen. On the other hand, you have to be great at what you do. Conor McGregor's a great fighter. Floyd Mayweather is one of the best boxers of all time. So when you take that pure talent in combination with being, very noisy, you throw that together, then you have a beautiful thing that turns into a ton of money, and same thing with Phil Fish. He's incredibly talented. So, but yeah, that's the end of my little tangent there.
Yeah. And we're definitely seeing, like, when people go that crazy, right? Look at the whole Twitch stream and the rise of the YouTuber. You have, like, people, screaming on camera. Stuff like PewDiePie, Markiplier.
Yeah.
And I can't even count how many Twitch streamers I was, like, looking up over the last few days. The people do crazy shit on camera. They're doing everything they can to get you to watch them. And again, as you're saying, Logan, it doesn't matter if you love or hate them. You're still going to tune in to see whatever the hell they're going to do.
Yeah.
Same thing with Kardashian. Same thing with Kanye West.
Yep.
And it goes back to the whole thing. I think, as you just said a few minutes ago, the classic PR statement. There is no such thing as bad PR. The people who can work it, like the experts, they can spin it that way. Look at everything with, like, Donald Trump going on right now and all the crazy shit he keeps saying. Oh God, imagine this cast in like a year or two from now. Like, what if Donald Trump does become president? It is insane to hear this for like common people, or like for like regular average people like myself and you guys. It's insane to hear these people say this stuff. But at the end of the day, when someone masters that level of spin, they can do whatever the hell they want, and people are still going to engage them. They're still going to follow them, even if they absolutely hate everything they do.
Yeah, but it really boils down to, they've just got to own it,
Yeah.
You can't just come out, act crazy, be really good at what you do, act crazy, and then people find out that you're not who that person is. That's where you kind of start to see some people fall, and this is all opinion at this point. But you can see with PR how strong it is, where someone like Donald Trump can possibly have a legitimate shot at being president. It's nuts, but the thing is, he's great with getting media attention. He's amazing at it. So when you're that great at getting people to talk about you, it doesn't matter what you say. Go out there and bash people and be a bully. Go out there and do it, because people are going to want to listen to it. People are going to want to read about it. It's going to evoke emotion from many people, but who cares? For them. I'm not recommending in any games that you do anything like that. I recommend being transparent, honest, show empathy towards your audience. But if you feel like you're dialing back your emotions, think about Phil Fish. Think about those guys that are just true people that, say what's on their mind. They're emotionally driven, but they're talented and they own up to it. That's who they are. And if you were to meet Phil Fish, he'd probably be an excellent guy. But if you'd meet him while he's in an argument, he would turn right into that guy that the media loves. But that's exactly who he is.
Definitely.
So, you be you is basically, I guess I could have summed up the whole tangent with just be yourself.
Yeah. fantastic conversation so far, and I can start to see that this could turn into like a 4 or 5 hour cast, considering all the topics we're covering. But let's step away from PR for a second, and let's talk a little bit about some of the other work that you do, Logan. And that is with the games that you are currently working on. So you mentioned, I think, Goblins and Grottos earlier in the cast. But for this section, for the people listening, could you talk a little bit about your current game projects?
Yeah, I can talk about 2 of them. I can't talk about the other 2. I have the contracts, I'm signing them, but they're not there yet. So I can say one of them is a really cool VR game, and I'm very excited to get on that. But that's all I can say about it. And the other one's really amazing as well, and I want to talk about both of them, but I can't. But the 2 right now is Grav and then Goblins and Grottos. Both games are made by really talented teams. One of them is being developed by Bitmonster Games, located in Raleigh, and then the other game is being developed by 2 separate studios, Goblin Portal and Psychic Software. Once again, excellent, very talented team. Grav is your sci-fi kind of sandbox survival game, where you play as an astronaut, and then you're kind of you start out on a starter planet, and your goal is to really just survive. You can play single player, or you can play PvP, and I mean there are PvE servers as well. But you can also do PvP, where you build your cool base and you level up your character. You get some really cool weapons and armor, and then you can you can kill other astronauts that are running around. And the game is gorgeous, and it's pretty polished. It's an early access title right now, so it is available to purchase. But that's the game I've been working on since April or May of last year. So yeah, that game's great. I can say that there is some really cool stuff in the works. I can't dive into that much further. I wish I could, but I've been preparing for some cool stuff that will be coming out soon for about a month now. So I'm very excited. I want to let the community know everything's okay. The game is not abandoned. It's far from it. The development team is hard at work, and they work on the game every single day. Grav, I would recommend that anyone that likes games like any survival type games, so like Ark, Rust, Daisy, H1Z1. If you like those games, but you also like your sci-fi RPG type games like Starbound, then Grav is perfect for you. And then on the flip side, if you're someone who is interested in survival games, but you don't really want to dive into full survival where you have to worry about, all the different aspects of survival, where it's, you have to eat, you have to drink constantly, you have to deal with those things or you die. If you don't want to worry about that, Grav is a great game to get you started in the survival genre. It's a bit more streamlined. But it's an overall really fun game, and some of the structures that you can build are really amazing. Grav is a really, it's a really fun game. And then the other game, Goblins and Grottos, is a hilarious game, and it also shares elements of like Mario Maker, because there is an event / scene builder in the game, and basically in Goblins and Grottos, it's like a 2D MMO parody type game where you play as a nameless goblin who you start the game out in a scene where you witness your family die because they're bosses. They die by a level 100 paladin who is leveling up. He's speed leveling up his level 1 noob friend, and he's power leveling him, and he goes and he kills your parents. And then, the item that they were carrying on them, was a muffin. And then, so the paladin's like, well, this sucks. Like the loot's terrible with these guys. So he chucks the muffin. And then, so basically you play as a nameless goblin who's trying to get back at that level 100 paladin that, killed your parents for loot and, and all that. So very, very fun game. It's a puzzle platformer. So, you run around, and there are other players in the game that there's a ton of references in the game. If you've played MMO games like World of Warcraft and other type games, if you've ever dabbled in that, you'll get a lot of the references. They're genuinely hilarious. But yeah, that game's a very funny game. I've played many hours with it, and I genuinely laugh like out loud with the game because the references are just so good. But it's very strategic. You play through the levels, and you can't just run through them. There's a lot of puzzle elements, and you can't fight a paladin. You don't have weapons, so you can't really like battle them. You have to be strategic in how you kill them or how you get rid of them so you can proceed. But yeah, that's very cool. There's a level builder, like I said. You can add your own scenes. You can put dialogue in there. So there's a lot of replayability because of the scene editor. You can upload your own scenes and stuff for other people to play. That is also an early access title, and we will be launching that. We'll be graduating from Steam Early Access very soon. We don't have an exact release date yet, but you can expect it sometime in the very near future. That game will be completely finished, and there are many things that have that are being worked on right now to add, a ton of new stuff to the game. I can't get into specifics, but there are a ton of new things coming to the game. So, if you're playing the Goblins and Grottos right now, there's a ton of cool content and additions, improvements, a ton of things that will be coming with the launch. So those are the two games that I'm currently working on.
Cool. Now, did you say that Goblins and Grottos, is that a single player only, or is that multiplayer?
It's a single player game, so you play through it as the Goblin, but it is multiplayer in that you can play other maps that are uploaded by the community. Kind of like Mario Maker, where you can, upload your own maps, people can rate them, play them, that kind of stuff.
Cool. And going back to Grov with the sandbox or the open survival theme, that genre has definitely seen a lot of traction over the last few years. I've seen, Minecraft, Ark, Rust. I mean, there's probably, for every one we mention, there's probably 10 more we're not mentioning.
Yeah.
And I guess my one concern, I just want to get your thoughts on this. Do you think that genre has become a little too saturated at the moment?
I would say yes and no. Yes, in that the zombie survival, post-apocalyptic story within survival games, that's been played out a lot. But that type of game is very good for streamers, for YouTubers. There's a lot of replayability. Those type of games, to succeed, you have to have a large audience. You have to have a lot of players. Which means it's kind of a boom or bust thing, where if it works, you make a lot of money potentially. And if it doesn't work, then it just, you don't make anything. But that's where marketing and PR is incredibly vital to those types of games. But you'll see games like Subnautica. It's technically a survival game, but it's different from an H1Z1 or a Daisy. It's a different spin on it. It's kind of like Minecraft underwater. But they do an excellent job with marketing and PR as well. But I personally love those games because they do really well in early access, and handling the marketing and PR of those types of games, it's kind of like a game as a service. And I love that. I love games as a service type strategy for these new games. I absolutely love it because it's beautiful for PR. It's perfectly set up for PR. So you have your news beats. So basically, the best way, in my opinion, to handle like an early access type survival game that you're going to be using as a game as a service, the best way to handle that is just like Team Fortress, where you announce a meaty update, or you let's say you launch it on early access, and it's available for people to play. So you're gathering an audience, and then in between, so you'll do small patches, update, clean out some bugs, those kinds of things for 2 to 3 weeks, or however long you do that. But every 2 to 3 months, package together really substantial changes and additions to the game as a meaty update.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you can really communicate the values of that update. You can make a landing page on your website dedicated to the update. You can give the update its own name. You can brand the update. You can give it its own kind of expansion type name while the game's still in development. You can send out press releases. You can reach out to press. You can reach out to streamers and YouTubers, and that happens every single time. So every 2 to 3 months you can do that. Because if a YouTuber or a streamer picked up your game before and played it, and they enjoyed it, dive back into the well in 2 or 3 months with your next major update. It's newsworthy. So there's just so many things you can do with that. And if you have a tight schedule like that, every 2 to 3 months, your community can start to expect some really great updates. And it's kind of like Christmas every 2 to 3 months. So that would be like my biggest recommendation for anyone that's working on a game that really relies on a multiplayer community where it's very large. You have to keep that community engaged or the population drops. And when the population drops in a multiplayer game, that's where you start to hear well, this game's dead. Is this game dead? And people start to not want to play it. But yeah, I love it. I absolutely, the game as a service is a beautiful thing. And I absolutely love it. AAA studios are kind of the champions of it right now, but there's a ton of indie studios that are doing it. And as a marketing and PR person, it's a gold mine. It's beautiful. Every 2 to 3 months, you can just pop out some great updates, but that relies on a development team that gets along with that, that kind of timeline as well. But it's perfect. I mean, you couldn't get any better. And the cool thing about that, like Team Fortress 2, for example, I guess they're not on a 2 to 3 month schedule at the moment. I guess it's kind of slowed down a bit, but in their prime, not necessarily prime, but back in the day, they would do every 2 to 3 months. They would slam out a major update. They'd make a very nice landing page or a landing hub if the update was big enough to effectively communicate the values of the update. And on top of that, they catered to their community by making comic books to help describe the Team Fortress game in a media format that is more appreciated by their community. And it's easier to make a comic book and talk about and throw some lore and story into the comic book than it is to bake that into the game. So if you do that as a comic book form, you can cut down on costs severely. And a lot of these multiplayer games, the people that play those games, they are anime fans, they're comic book fans. So it's a media format that they personally enjoy. So it's easier to do. Sometimes you can even get like an artist from your community to help you with the comic books, and you can really cut down on your costs by doing that. But basically, game as a service, in my opinion, thumbs up. That's the way to go if you are an indie developer that's thinking about making a multiplayer game, or you currently have a multiplayer game that's in early access. I would recommend switching your timeline to every 2 to 3 months, major update. In between the updates, you do your patches, your bug fixes. On top of that, on my end, what I like to do during that time period in between your 2 to 3 month major updates, I like to do player interviews. I like to interview the community, players in the community. So I get a sense of what they like about the game in its current state, what they don't like, some of their ideas, notes. On top of that, I'll get data like their demographics and other psychographic information so I can start to fill out personas. But basically, in interviewing your community in between your major updates, you can start to find out trends and things from your community that you might not have even thought of for your game beforehand. And then that's a cool thing that, maybe not the next update, but the update after that, you can start to inject some of the ideas and some of the cool things that the community's brought up. But that's only available to the game as a service type, plan, marketing strategy. It's beautiful. Like I said, it's a beautiful thing. It's awesome.
Yeah, Ben. Again, you've hit so many good points, and I agree with you on. Again, there'll be another fist bump moment if you're here, but seriously, about when you can establish that reliable time frame for updates, make it big, make it powerful, stuff like that, it goes so much not only towards building your brand, but again, assuring fans that there is work being done. Team Fortress, as you just said, is like the brilliant example of that. Again, like every time they have a major update, you get the landing page, you get maybe like a little video or a comic, and like all that lore is like hardly referenced in game at all. But you can go on their website and you get tons of comic books, character backgrounds. I mean, hell, the whole Meet the Team videos was the thing that got me to play Team Fortress in the first place. And like that games of the service model, when it works, it does so much. Like with Payday 2 as an example, every year they have what was called the Crime Fest update, where they basically do not just a week of free updates to the community, but they have like 2 to 3 months of preamble where they let fans decide, what do they want to see in the game. If you do these specific tasks, we'll add X, Y, and Z. And as you said, Logan, it builds engagement. It gets people excited, and it's something marketable. Mm-hmm. And for someone like you who specializes in PR, these things are basically like dreams for you.
Yeah.
Like when a developer says, hey, we're going to do this major event 2 months, we have all this stuff, you have something you can show people. And it goes, again, circles back to what we said earlier in this cast. People want something tangible. They want to see that you're doing work. They want to see that this game is going from point A to point B to point C, etc. And when you can do that, and when you can do it big and do it reliably, it can really sustain that game's lifespan in the community. Same thing with Prison Architect, like with early access games. If you can commit to, let's say, every 2 weeks a new build, or every month a new alpha, these events become these moments become timed events that gets people excited and keeps them engaged. Mm-hmm. My example would be Clockwork Empires. Every month they release a new update. They have like a fancy new name. They send out the email, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And it changes the game and it keeps people excited. Like I usually check the game out like every month, and I know like usually like mid to end of the month to expect that email. The same thing with Prison Architect. And these kinds of little tips and tricks to expand your game and grow the brand, it doesn't sound all that hard like to someone from the outside, mm-hmm. but it requires a lot of work. And as you just said, Logan, you have to make sure the team can handle it.
Yeah.
I just want to, if you have something to say, I just want to finish this quick thing.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Too often, I see developers burn out when they do like a once-a-week patch or every 2 weeks a new patch. If your team can't keep up with it and starts to slag or start to lag and stuff like that, it can come back to backfire on you.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I've seen teams that'll do, they try to, when they come on early access, they try to just burst onto the scene and every 1-2 weeks throw out an update, a patch, something. But the problem with that is over time, that loses mm-hmm. its value because you cannot in every 2 to 3 weeks put together an update that is meaty enough, that is incredibly substantial. So over time, if you do that, for 6 months to a year, at the end of the year or at the end of the 6 months, your game's probably not going to look that much different to players that played it on day one if you're doing these tiny little changes every week, every 2 weeks. That's why you got to really think further. Do performance enhancements and bug fixes and patches and things like that sparingly in between your major updates, but you always got to have that major mm-hmm. milestone in the plans. But it's like I said, it's a beautiful thing. I love it because mm-hmm. I've seen the responses from communities when that kind of updates cadence mm-hmm. happens, and it's so good. It's so fun too. And on top of that, especially if you're in early access, if you're going to do an update cadence like that, it's especially amazing if you can string out your announcement and all these details. And I can send you a link to it. A lot of these details, I learned about them initially from an old Steam Dev Days talk from one of the members of Valve who handles the communications and basically the communication regarding their updates for Team Fortress, and mm-hmm. and he kind of spelled out the whole timeline and process. I've just added to it a bit with marketing and PR, but it's an amazing talk. It's on YouTube. It's awesome. But basically, the real, kind of a golden standard for me when I'm handling these kinds of updates is if you can make it into an event. Yes. I like to think about my partners' updates as like the major updates as their birthday or as their wedding, mm-hmm. or it's their day. That's their day. I don't care about any other games. I don't care about Fallout release, whatever. Like, mm-hmm. I'll talk to you tomorrow, like it's your day. It's your time to shine. You've put in all this, mm-hmm. this effort into this major update. So you've got to take advantage of it. So one of the cool things that you can do is if you can drip feed the content of your update in between 3 to 4 days,
yes,
that's even better. So it's basically if you can make your link page hub, maybe hold back some content, and then drip feed it. So day 1, talk about one major feature. Day 2, talk about another major feature. Day 3, talk about another, and then day 4, announce.
You release it.
Yeah, and you announce it and you release it, and it's like, oh my god, there's been all this buildup as a player.
Mm-hmm.
How can it get any better than that? It's like they keep teasing me with all this stuff, and then oh crap, I can play this today. You know?
Yep, and Team Fortress and Payday have definitely have done that. Payday 2, I mean, every time they have a new DLC, they do exactly what you just said, Logan. Like, Star of the Week, day 1, we announced the name. Day 1, they announced the name of it and say there's going to be a landing page soon. Day 2, the landing page goes up, we have a little bit of detail. Day 3, more detail. Day 4, a little bit more. And then day 5, we release it.
Yeah.
And again, it makes those events, as you said, these are supposed to be those momentous occasions. You have to own them. And when it works, as you just said, it just really, I can't stress enough, it just really helps everything involved. And it's what has led to Payday 2 going from 6 months of they're just going to do post-release support to we're going on 2 years.
Yeah.
And they've already announced 18 more months of support for Payday 2. And if you weren't doing the games like this, if you were just doing the old school, we release it and then maybe release a patch and then we're done, we wouldn't be having these conversations. But stuff like Team Fortress has certainly mastered it. Even like free-to-play games like League of Legends is another good example of keeping the community engaged, keep putting out content. And again, when you can get on that track, when you can do it reliably, it really everything just sings. And from what I've seen with a lot of developers, like as you just said a few minutes ago, doing like a 1 to 2 week patch or major patch, it usually will backfire on you. I don't think there's a team in the world who can release game-changing content every week and still build a game.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Usually, I think it's like a month to 2 months for major updates seems to be like a good threshold. I think Stonehearth, which is it was a Kickstarter city build. I think they're like every 2 months they do a major build. And again, once you get that track that works for you, you have to be consistent. Because that's how this whole games of the service thing will succeed or fail. If you break your own rules or you start losing that communication, it goes back to what we said earlier in this cast. Those fans who love you, they will turn on you.
Yeah. I mean, the whole process, if I were to break it down as simple as I possibly could for marketing and PR, the entire process, I would break it down like this. I would break it down as early in your game's development, as early as possible, do target market research, to try to better understand where your game, like what's the values of your game, what does your game do that's unique, and then start to understand similar games. Figure out, what truly is unique about your game. Then do target audience research. Understand the demographics of your audience, what platform they play on, the genre. Then start to fill out, your personas, so psychographics. I guess it's not simple, but basically understand your game, where it stands in the competitive landscape against other similar type games. Understand your audience. Figure out what positioning statement. So your audience isn't one pocket. It's different segments. So it could be men between the ages of 18 and 24 that like first person shooters like Call of Duty. They also enjoy TV shows like whatever. They like this kind of music. And so you can fill out those personas. You can get like 3 or 4 of those. And that's your audience. You can reevaluate that over time, every 3 to 6 months, but that's your audience. So figure out where your game stands in the competitive landscape. What does your game do that's unique and is great at? Find the audience that would most enjoy your type of game. And then once you start to understand that, that's when you get on this update cadence. And then you start to cater to that audience. And that's where your player surveys and interviews really help out during early access in between major updates, where you talk to your community. You always are listening to your community. You're always learning more about them, what they like, what they don't like. And then that's when you throw down on the 2 to 3 month major update gauntlet, and then really throw out these updates on platforms and in different media formats that your audience likes the most. So if your audience is heavy into anime and comic books, do an online comic book to help describe the story of your game or backstory of your game. You know, if your audience is heavy into watching movies or whatever, if you can do it, it's not always available, but if you can do it, make launch trailers for each of your major updates. These cinematic trailers that like Team Fortress does, they do a combination of the both. They do cinematic trailers along with comic books. It's not available to everyone, but if you can do it, do it.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, if your audience is heavy into, you know, certain types of music, try to launch a mini soundtrack with your major update. What new music is going into that major update? Package that together. You know, release that as a free soundtrack edition. Just cater to your audience. There are so many different ways that you can cater, but you have to always start by understanding your game, what is best about your game, how it stacks up against the competition. Then the next step is to learn about your target audience. Who are the people that would most enjoy your game? And then what else do they enjoy in their life? You know, once you understand how what they enjoy most outside of gaming in general, then you can start to really home in on, you know, your updates, how you present them, how you communicate the updates, and what different media formats do you give them in each update. And then just keep optimizing it every 2 to 3 months. Learn more about your audience, learn more about what they want, make your game better. And then, you know, every single 2 to 3 months. And it's just a continuous cycle. But it's great. Oh, and another thing with your audience, you want to understand not only what they enjoy in life, but you also want to understand who are their influencers. What streamers do they watch? What YouTubers do they check out? You know, what publications do they go to learn about video games? Where do they go to learn about video games? Once you can start to nail that stuff. So not only on your update cadence are you giving them content, and you're communicating it in a way that they enjoy it, and you're also giving them media formats that they enjoy, like comic books or trailers, but go to their influencers, go to the publications that they like to visit, get in front of them, because then they're going to share your information to that audience and similar people of that audience. So you'll grow. And I mean, I guess that was as simple as I could make it. It kind of strung out a while, but kind of that's basically the whole entire process. You can get into tiny little tactics and how you can improve things and how you can, you know, your entire strategy, you can kind of get really granular on how you do all of that. But for the most part, that's the entire process.
Yeah. And again, a lot of really great points to dissect. And I think we've somehow, just casually through conversation, we've segued into talking more about indie PR and the do's and don'ts. So I think we'll transition fully into that to wrap up the cast with this final topic. But yeah, a lot of great points there, Logan. And I think another part of that, as you just said, regarding engaging the fans and figuring out what they like, it's also important to understand what your strengths are. It's better to do something good than to try and do something half-assed or something that's going to be of low quality, because then you risk upsetting the fans. As you said, if you have someone on your team who can make amazing soundtracks and you have fans who like that, you definitely want to get those soundtracks up. If you have someone who's good at making little Makima, or videos and stuff like that, and your audience responds to that, get them to do it every month. But if you're, like, for example, we see like a lot of Kickstarters where people, let's face it, not everyone is good in front of a camera. I know I'm not personally good. That's why I don't do a lot of live, like a lot of video stuff. But if you're not good at that, you don't want to try and pitch your game or pitch yourself on something you're not strong with, because then you're hurting yourself in the process. A really good example of this would be, there's that Kickstarter for an RPG like last year, I think, or earlier this year, where like the whole Kickstarter trailer video made like literally no sense. Had like two women like arguing about the game.
Yeah.
I forget the name of it, but like you watch and you're like, what the hell does this have to do with a video game?
Yeah, and trailers are, I mean, that's arguably, I guess it's not even arguably, the trailer is the most vital part of any marketing strategy. Not even a strategy, it's just the most vital part about your game, really. Because when someone goes to your Steam app page, or they have the Google Play page, iOS, App Store page, Kickstarter, whatever, first thing you're doing, if you're generally interested at all, is you're going to play the trailer and you want to see it. So if you mess your trailer up, then, you're definitely, it's a fact of life that if your trailer is not as good as it possibly could be, then you're definitely losing out on players.
Yeah, and the art of making a good trailer is another 2-hour conversation right there.
Yeah.
Because there are so many things. I mean, especially with Kickstarter and the level of transparency it has given us, has really been a treasure trove of information about the do's and the don'ts. Not just for indie development, but again, for marketing, advertising, etc. We mentioned earlier in this cast the My Number 9 trailer, which has, again, it's earned buzz, but it's got a lot of people worry about the state of that project. And this, again, circles back to everything we've talked about with proper communication and updates. If people, let's say someone has been paying attention to My Number 9, but they kickstarted, and the first thing they see of that game is that trailer, they're going to be like, what the hell did I just give my money to? Same thing with Goddess, when they originally pitched it as a single-player spiritual successor to Populous. It turned to, we're going to make it mobile, and we're going to do multiplayer. And it just was, again, it wasn't even just a sliding slope. It was just a downward spiral into probably one of the biggest Kickstarter failures. So, I guess for this part, I have a few questions I'm going to ask you, Logan, and I also want to get James's feedback on this as someone who's an enthusiast, who's someone who sees this stuff from the outside. So, to start with you, Logan, we've been talking bits and pieces about this throughout this entire cast, and hell, we could probably keep talking about this for the next who knows how many hours, but as someone, specifically for someone like you who does PR on a day-to-day basis, who manages these things and assists game developers, for people listening, are there any major do's and any major don'ts that you see with your job that it would be good for people to learn about?
Well, I guess that's a kind of a tough question, huh?
Yeah.
There are a few pet peeves that I have. I personally don't like it when game developers use Tumblr as your main blog. I don't recommend it. I guess my biggest pet peeve would be with video game studios that make different websites for every single game that they make. When traditional SEO purposes, you want to make sure that you have everything on a single domain, because with every game that you make, you're going to have press. Hopefully, you have press. You have people that are linking or pointing links towards your domain. But if you make a new website for every single game that you make in the future, you're basically starting from ground zero. And this, I say it's a pet peeve because SEO is not from my opinion, SEO is not as vital to the video game scene as it is to everything else. Cause you don't go to Google and search, or at least I don't go to Google and search, open world survival game PC to find a new video game to play. I just don't do that. I'll go to Steam or I'll go to, whatever platform, has all the games, and I'll look there. But I won't go to Google and do a search. So SEO is not as big of a deal for video games, in my opinion. But it's a pet peeve because you're basically starting from ground zero with every new game that you make in terms of backlinks, which with not only Google search, Bing, whatever search engine, it's still arguably the most vital part of rankings in Google's algorithm, and other search engines' algorithms, is that it's domain authority, basically links that are pointed towards your game. It gets a little bit more detailed than that, but that for the very broad overview, that's kind of a good description for that.
Okay.
So when you make, like I said, you make all these new game websites, you're starting from ground zero. And on top of that, if you can keep everything clean on the same domain, so a good structure would be company or studio name.com / whatever the game name is. And then, so if you have a major update in the future, it would be company name.com / game / update name. It's very clean. But on top of that, it helps build your reputation. If I go to like unknownworlds.com, I believe is the name, I could be messing that up, but I can see on there that they make Subnautica, and Natural Selection. There's some games on there that I had no idea that they made. But I know that because they keep all of their games in the landing pages for those games on the same domain. So they're really winning. If you want to see a great example of what I'm talking about, go to unknownworlds.com and look around that website. You'll see that unknownworlds.com, the landing page is about the studio. The design is about the studio. But when you click on Subnautica, you'll be taken to a website that looks completely different. It's about Subnautica. The design fits. But that's absolutely perfect. Couldn't get any better. So
yeah, and of course it's still tied to the original Unknown Worlds, like in terms of the HTTP link or HTML link, right?
Yeah, so it's unknownworlds.com /Subnautica or /game/Subnautica. I'm not sure the exact structure, but it's there. And the other cool thing, like I said earlier, is that I went to their website because I knew of Subnautica. I wanted to check it out. But then I clicked around on their website, and then I found, they worked on Natural Selection. So now their reputation in my mind has grown.
And if they kept things separate, like let's say they had one website being subnauticalgame.com, another one being naturalselectiongames.com, you wouldn't have been able to, they wouldn't be able to link that together. And I think that's a really great point, Logan. That's another thing that really annoys me. Like, sometimes you see developers, like, their actual developers, like, let's say GameStudio.com, may just be one page that says, we make these games, and there's, like, no links anywhere else. And then you click on the game link, and it takes you to, thatgamename.com. There's no link back. And you said the SEO is not connected between those pages.
Yeah.
It's the thing that I do with Game Wisdom. I make sure that everything links back to Game Wisdom, no matter where I post, no matter whether you're on Twitch or YouTube or Twitter, whatever, it all goes back there. And again, and from Game Wisdom, it all links out there as well. So no matter where you're finding this game or finding this website, it will all basically connect to each other.
Yeah, and I mean, there are some studios that they'll include a link to their studio in the footer of the website. It'll be a different website for the game itself, and then in the footer you'll see a link to the studio. That's not nearly as good. And if you think about it, not only is it not as good for link value, but if you want to think about it as a potential customer, if I check out a video game, I'm going to be less likely to click on your studio link in the footer to look at your studio. So I'm less likely to find out about your studio, what other games you're working on. But if you keep it all in the same domain and you keep it nice and clean, people are curious. Sometimes they'll click around on your website and then they can stumble upon a whole bunch of cool stuff. And now not only have you sold one game, you might have sold 2 or 3 different games, and you've built a brand. Now you're starting to be more reputable to these potential players. But yeah, I mean, that's a pet peeve. If I want to go to a straight do's and don'ts, or things that I see, I guess, I would say take advantage. Really do not underestimate your news beats, with your video game. News beats are like the announcement of your game, news, like really serious screenshots that show off brand new sections of your game. Not like a Screenshot Saturday post of something small, but like some serious new screenshot info. Your release date, the announcement of your release date is a big news beat. The release day is a big news beat. But you'll see a lot of game studios that kind of just follow what they find through like Gamma Sutra, GDC videos, through the GDC Vault. There's a ton of different resources, and you'll get a lot of great info, like writing your press releases, emailing publications in specific, like individually. Do not mass email. Same thing goes for streamers and YouTubers. You want to be as personal as you possibly can. But that's kind of the basics. That's the absolute basics of doing this. So when people learn that, they kind of just follow the basics. But you want to be creative, and I can give you a great example of taking advantage of a news beat. Recently, Tiny Build, and if you're ever interested in learning more about marketing and PR with indie games, follow Tiny Build and Devolver Digital. Those are the two indie game publishers that they're the best. I mean, there might be some other ones out there that are great, but those are the two that I follow the most, and they're amazing. Tiny Build in particular lately has been getting crazy, and I love it. But Tiny Build, recently they were announcing that Speedrunners was going to graduate from early access. Now, that is a news beat announcing that it's going to release from early access. That's not really that big a deal. Like, that happens every day. Games graduate from early access every day. It's a news beat technically. Yes. If you follow the basics, absolutely it is. But if you're a writer at IGN or Polygon and you see a press release, or you get an email from a developer that says, hey, our game's releasing from early access on this date. Yeah. Depending on how dry you are for content, you're probably not going to write about it. You don't care, whatever. But they did a great job by tying that in with a very insightful article where they said that during early access, the publisher and developer behind Speedrunners, Tiny Build, gave out over $2 million worth of Steam keys to make sure that the multiplayer community didn't fall off the map and it stayed consistent and thrived. And that was a very, not many developers talk about that kind of stuff. They don't dive deep into specifics like that. So it's very interesting. It's a great piece of information to, for news outlets to pick up and share and all that good stuff. So they made a really insightful post. And at the very bottom, they wrote, oh, by the way, Speedrunners is graduating from early access on this date. And guess what? They got coverage by IGN. They got coverage by Polygon. I'm sure they got coverage on Destructoid, Kotaku. They got coverage all over the place because in the articles by these publications, the title was, developer Tiny Builds gives away $2 million worth of Steam keys for Speedrunners. It wasn't Speedrunners is graduating from early access on this date, but they would include it in the articles. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, they got the information that they wanted to get out there. They got it out there, and they got it covered by big publications because they not only stood by the basics, but they were very creative about it. And they didn't just go exactly by the books. They used creativity to help gain coverage by publications. So
yeah. And I think a lot of good points there, especially about trying to get, spice up your PR or spice up your press releases, try time events like that. Timing, I think, is one of the hardest things for a lot of game developers to get right because the game industry is always fluctuating on those points.
Yeah.
You never know when some indie developer you've never heard of is going to make this huge announcement. Mm-hmm. There are some things we can time. We know probably this month there's going to be a Steam summer sale. Mm-hmm. We know around October, November is going to be when the big AAA games are usually released, in time for the holidays. But for the most part, for the rest of the time, you kind of have to really pay attention to these things. And one pet peeve for me as someone who's trying to get in touch with developers and again going back to website design, when you hide your press contacts, just drives me nuts. You talk about when it's in the header or the footer at the bottom of the site. There's sometimes where I have to dig through a website to find an email to get in touch with someone. And it's just nerve-wracking to do it because you never know, are they even going to bother checking with that? And that level of communication, you should always respond to people as well. Mm-hmm. You don't want people to be left hanging 2-3 weeks going, did he get my email? Did they not? I don't know. Yeah. And that kind of stuff, again, is someone who's trying to reach out and grow, and especially try to get you free publicity, it just annoys the hell out of me. Now, this next question, I know, James, you have been quiet as cast, but I know you've been probably taking notes on your end about everything we've talked about.
Very much so.
I guess to throw this over to you for a second, as someone who's an enthusiast and as someone who's also trying to help me with the PR of the site and trying to learn things on your own, do you have any questions for Logan, anything that you've been wondering about that you've been sitting on?
Well, definitely. He said a lot of the things that I know I've talked to you about personally, Josh, especially little things you need to make a big deal out of every little thing that you do. If your site's getting because that's going to bring people. It's going to be, people are going to, people get interested. You know what I mean? Anytime you see sales like big closing event, trying to get rid of this, trying to get, 10% off today only. Like, people go after anything, and they're looking for a reason to pull themselves away from the mundanity that is their life. So, and that's why another thing I was really trying to convey to you, Josh, especially for Game Wisdom, like, and you're growing. You just hit 500 subscribers. Mm-hmm. That needs to be a post on your Facebook. That needs to be a post on Game Wisdom Facebook. That should be a post on anything that you can pop that on. You know what I mean? Like, because people are gonna see that. You know what I mean? Well, who are these subscribers? You know what I mean? Like, I he is definitely saying a lot of the things that I've been saying now as confirmed. Is that something? Am I correct in that? I guess I would say, Logan.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the things I would also like to stress is that you need to cater to your audience and really learn about your audience. Think about yourself in the other shoe. So a great example goes back to what you were talking about with the press information. As a game developer, you have different audiences that give you different sort of responses. So responses is completely wrong word for that. But as a game developer, for your game to succeed, you need players to buy it. So that's why you need to cater to them in terms of what they like to ingest. So if it's a game trailer, you give them a game trailer. If they like comics, give them a comic. If and you want to cater to them. That's why bundling together media updates really satisfies their needs, because you're catering to their needs. But on the other hand, how do you get those players? Well, you need to cater to press as well. You need to make their lives as easy as possible. So to do that, you got to make sure that your press kit is readily available. You need to make sure that all the information that they want is available for them to find with the least amount of clicks as possible. And one of the tricks I do with that is when I'm emailing, a writer or anybody in press, I cater my emails to them. So if I'm writing someone at a blog for a video game, I'll include a press release at the very bottom. I paste it there because that press release has content that they can copy and paste into their article. I also link to a trailer because that's a good form of media that they can copy and paste into their article. Same thing with screenshots. I include that in there because, once again, they can grab that. They can use that in their article. They don't even have to leave the email to get all the information that they need about the update or any sort of news that I'm trying to pitch to them to make an article about it. That's just simply knowing your audience and catering to it. So if you want to, grow your audience with your blog, I would recommend you just do research about your audience. Mm-hmm. What kind of posts on Facebook and Twitter have gotten the most engagement in the past? Those are great insights into what your audience enjoys. Mm-hmm. So just learning more about your audience, what they like, and where they go, what platforms, what social media platforms do they use, what influencers do they follow and do they listen to? Once you start to understand these things, you can start to work on a content strategy or social media strategy where you push out this content to them in ways that they like to ingest content. So it's all about catering to whoever you want help from. If you want help from a player in the form of purchasing your game, then you have to cater to their needs in the form of whatever kind of game they want. And that's where your positioning statement comes into play, because you understand you've done your audience research. You understand what they like in certain games. Well, does that align with what's best about your game? What aspect of your game that is awesome? If that's the case, if there is some sort of compatibility there, then your elevator pitch, your positioning statement, whatever, needs to match that certain type of audience, because you're speaking directly to them. So, I mean, I could go on and on about that, but my advice would always be, understand your audience as best as possible, and you do that by research, by listening to them, by following them, by communicating with them, engaging with them. You learn about them, and then communicate with them. So engage your audience. So I guess that's kind of a tangent, but
all right, definitely a great point there, Logan, regarding just trying to, I guess, reach out to people, trying to build that known. I mean, again, a lot of the stuff has been self-taught or trying to self-teach myself these things myself, and I know I've screwed up on a lot of them, and that's why I've been doing more with reaching out to people for help, with trying to build a YouTube, Twitter, etc., and I'm starting to see that starting to see some fruits of that labor. As James just said, we finally hit 500 subscribers on YouTube. I think I'll make a big post about that, at least according in terms of this recording time on that day, just to let everyone know. Again, it is a learning process, and it's one that's becoming more and more important, not just for people like myself, but especially for people trying to make a game and trying to make a successful game. Because one of the things I keep saying is that it doesn't matter how great or thought-provoking your game is if no one's ever heard of you or your studio. And I've seen a lot of cases where games just pop up on Steam and then they're gone within like an hour or two just because the discoverability wasn't there. The developer didn't do the job of making people aware of it. And talking about that issue with, the storefronts and trying to make a name for yourself there, I mean, hell, that's 3 hours right there we could talk about easily. But I believe it is time to wrap things up. I know for those of you used to our 3-hour podcasts, I've been trying to get away from those just because I can feel my throat starting to dry up. I'm sure, Logan, you're about parched as well.
Yeah, I've been drinking some coffee during this to keep my throat from drying out completely.
Yeah, so I think we'll definitely wrap this up. At least for right now. I would love to have you back on. Again, there's so many topics, especially as someone who's been looking at this from the PR side. There's a lot of different ways we can go with future conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. And James, I'm sure you definitely enjoyed this cast. I know you probably didn't say as much as our last one, but I'm sure you got a lot out of it, especially, again, as someone trying to make that transition from enthusiast to more of an active member in the game industry.
Yes, very much so. I learned a lot, actually. Thank you very much, Logan, because that's going to help me to help Josh a lot more, too.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for doing the podcast on your birthday. Happy birthday again.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, this was his birthday present. But yeah, this was definitely a fantastic cast, Logan. And again, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I say this at the end of every cast, I'll say in the next few minutes as well, but it's always great to talk to the various members and pieces of the game industry because it is such a diverse group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
All right, so with all that said, we're going to wrap up. Well, we're going to, I guess, end this conversation, but we'll definitely have to come back to this again in the future. Again, Logan, thank you so much for coming on. And James, as always, it's a pleasure having you on, and especially to thank you for all the work you've done. And again, for me, definitely happy birthday for you for being able to come on and, again, have this great conversation.
It was an honor. Thank you.
All right, so as always, for those of you listening to this cast, if you would like to support Game Wisdom in the future, we have several options available. As I always keep saying, if you would like to be a guest on a future podcast or write a guest piece for the site, you can find all the information and links under Submissions Wanted on the front page. Again, if you're an enthusiast, student, developer, any part of the game industry, as long as you're willing to talk about with us, I am more than happy to have you on. If you'd like to support the Patreon side of things to keep Game Wisdom funded and allow me to expand with more features, you can find me on Patreon under Game Wisdom. A donations would be greatly appreciated. You can also click on that little Patreon banner on the front page. I've recently updated the Patreon with more defined stretch goals, as well as some cute little rewards for you guys, so definitely take a look. If you'd like to check out the video side of things, you can find me on Twitch under GW Bycer, and on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel. You'll find a variety of videos of Let's Plays, video review supplementals, and a whole lot more. Be sure to check that out, and of course, like and subscribe to the channel. And lastly, be sure to subscribe on Twitter under GW Bycer to get the latest updates when content goes live, as well as random thoughts from me throughout the day. This end of video speech has gotten longer and longer as I keep adding more stuff. But yeah, definitely a lot of great stuff, and Game Wisdom will continue to grow. So again, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Perceptive Podcast, and a special thank you for those of you watching the audio version of this on YouTube as well. Be sure to check that out if you're just coming to the YouTube channel. Have a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you again next time. Hopefully with a lot more water, because my throat's about to die. Anyway, have a great night, folks.